This is the Tabernacle podcast with a guest, Jim Reed, and me, John Vermiglia. Welcome to the podcast, Jim.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Are you sure?
I am sure.
It's in the teens outside, and you are from Tampa, Florida.
I like the cold. I just don't like to be cold.
Well, that's the problem, is usually with cold comes being cold, at least at some point. Just a little bit.
Dress warmly.
How warm was it when you left Tampa? Just say it for our podcast listeners who we've been in a long winter.
About 82 degrees.
82 degrees. Did you go to the airport in flip-flops?
No, because I was coming here. But I do wear flip-flops 98% of the time.
God bless flip-flops and those who wear them. Yeah. So today on the podcast, we have Jim Reed. Jim, I think I first met you probably 20 years ago, 20-ish, somewhere around there. Yeah. I think it was in Indian Springs, the camp meeting down in Flovilla, Georgia.
And you were grateful to have a salad and not have to eat fried chicken.
100%. That's another story, but this camp is famous for Southern comfort food, and I got invited to the cabin of Jim and Beth, and we had a healthier option. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But Jim is a counselor, and we wanted to introduce you to the podcast family because you've spent the week here with our staff providing a training intensive in the area of counseling. We have a few licensed counselors, most are not, and probably more of what our staff does is more spiritual direction. But so much of life is counseling, and that is your practice, that's your profession. How many years have you been in counseling?
I've probably been practicing and been licensed 30 years.
30 years.
So I started my doctoral program, I don't remember now, 1982.
That long ago.
And then I did an internship at the University of Missouri in Columbia, Missouri, and then moved to Tampa, started working at the University of South Florida Counseling Center, and then in 93, I opened Life Connections, a nonprofit counseling center run by Christians.
Nice.
It's still going.
Still, and now you don't do as many clients as you used to. In fact, I think you said you retired.
I am retired.
Right. But a lifetime of counseling and wisdom that is not just based in your profession, but more importantly, you call on the wisdom of God because you're a born-again Christian. You're an elder in your church. Where actually are you from? Can you give us a little idea of your background?
Yes. My parents were missionaries at a radio station in Liberia, West Africa. So I was born in Monrovia, Liberia. I believe I was the first child to missionaries, and it may have been the first white baby born. So when my mom gave birth, she was in the operating theater with the balcony filled with all the nurses who wanted to watch a white woman give birth.
Oh, my.
Thankfully,
so she had an audience?
She had an audience.
Oh, my.
And the doctor was a German guy, but thankfully I have no memories of that
You have no memories of that. That would have been traumatic. Yeah. You're married. You have 2 children.
Correct.
And one of the sessions that you shared with us really had to do with marriage. And so for our podcast family, we've done just a few podcasts ago, we did Help My Marriage Part 1, which was an interview with Tim and Heidi Burgess. They have an excellent marriage, a lot of things about their marriage that I admire. They also do counseling, and it was a very helpful conversation. But in that, we promised that there would be a Help My Marriage Part 2. So here's the announcement. For those of you that have been harassing me on Sundays, where's Help My Marriage Part 2 with Adam and Rachel Ray? Illness for both of them on back-to-back weeks kind of messed up our scheduling just a little bit. That's still going to happen, but that's going to be a Part 3. This is Help My Marriage Part 2. So we thought while we had you in town, let's just take a look from a different angle because you have your own marriage experience. You have friends and people in your church. You've observed marriages. Your children are married. But then you've also worked with so many couples, done so much study on it. And after I saw the content of what you shared, even just this morning, I was like, we need to put that on a podcast because I believe this will be helpful for someone. So it's a little bit different than our last podcast on marriage, but I think this will help your marriage. And we start with the question, what is a marriage? How did you define that for us?
Well, I read a definition from a book by Tim Keller, The Meaning of Marriage. And I think it's just a very compact but thoroughly Christian understanding of a marriage. And let me read that, and then I'll say a few things about it. He says, marriage is a lifelong monogamous relationship between a man and a woman for the purpose of reflecting his saving love for us in Christ, refining our character, creating a stable human community for the birth and nurture of children, and bringing the sexes into an enduring whole life union. And so for Christians, marriage is more than just a relationship. It's a relationship that points to a spiritual reality of the church being the bride of Christ. It also points to the spiritual reality of us being in union with Christ. And so for Christians, marriage, we have a very high view of marriage, and we also know that God uses marriage as part of his process to make us more like his son. Because being in a marriage, the task of a marriage is learning to love somebody who is different from you. And that's really difficult to do. We're very good at loving ourselves and not very good at loving other people. And so in marriage, if you really take your marriage seriously, your marriage vows seriously, you're really making a promise to somebody that no matter what happens, I will stay the person I am today in terms of my commitment to you. So Christians never say, we just grew apart, because that meant they're not doing anything to keep their marriage alive. They don't say, we just quit loving each other, because we see the love in a marriage is not this romantic thing, but it's a choice to be faithful to promises that we made, because those promises reflect the character of God and his promise to us that he will love us.
Right.
And so we have a very high view of marriage, and even though it's difficult and messy, there is a spiritual reality that is reflected in marriage, and a healthy marriage does help a community. Healthy marriages just give a model for how humans can live in a loving relationship. Every healthy marriage will have conflict, but healthy marriages deal with them in very respectful ways. So.
Right. I think one of the things that I wrote, I'm just reading off my notes, you have the master copy, which I was writing fast, and so I'm going to ask for copies for those later.
Okay, yeah.
But I think at one point, the simplified version there was, you said that marriage is a picture of our union with Christ.
Right.
And I think, or what I was thinking when you shared that, is how so many people check out of marriage, and we forget, like when we say I do, it's first a vow to God. It's a vow before God, but it's to God, and it's a vow to this person. So as my union with Christ, it's this picture that we're giving to the world,
right?
Of what it's supposed to look like with Christ, because I'm very much different than Christ, and he's changing me.
Right.
So you said the word, or I don't know if you said the word in the definition. I'm old school Christian ghetto. I wrote that there's a sanctifying part.
Yes, definitely.
Of marriage. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Well,
like what does that mean when we say it sanctifies us? Because marriage is hard.
Because the hard things usually reveal attitudes in us that are selfish or based on fear or past relationships that were unhealthy. We bring into a marriage all the expectations we have about relationships that we learn in our family of origin, and expectations sometimes that this person's going to meet all our needs, and nobody can. Only God can do that. And so God uses that to teach us how to have self-giving love. Within the Trinity, each member, each person of the Trinity is giving of self and love to the other, and that's a picture of what Christian relationships are moving towards, where God's helping us love a spouse, and eventually, for many children, they're very different from ourselves. And in doing that, what we're learning to do is to make somebody else's good as important to us as our own good. It's almost like we incorporate their good into our good. You know, when Christ says, love others as you love yourself, we have no problem loving ourselves. But to love others that same way, so their good is as important to us and as valuable to us as our own good. When you can come into a marriage that way, you can have harmony, because each will be giving in love to the other. And as we are trying to do that, God uses that to reveal all the things that stop us, usually some kind of sinful pattern, some mistaken beliefs, and God uses that to refine us so that over time, I think as marriages grow, there should be increasing harmony and deepening of love in the marriage.
Right. You said something, you were talking about how the family of origin can impact.
Right.
Like you bring, I remember one person saying that your past and your family past, the family of origin, you actually take that into the marriage, mine and hers.
Yes, definitely.
And, I'll just speak for my wife and I. We have completely different families. One of the interesting things is some of the tools that I learned from my father and mother. When we were dating, those were so attractive to my wife because it was so different from what she was used to. Then when you get into the mess of marriage, you're just like your father.
Yeah.
Right? But it's learning how that self-giving love that you talked about, that is what Christ did for us.
Yes.
And so in the hardest place to do that is the person sometimes that is closest to me.
Right.
And learning how to give love in the same way.
Because that kind of intimacy leaves us feeling vulnerable. It leaves us feeling exposed, and we don't like that. When you look at the fall, when Adam and Eve fell, when they ate of the whatever fruit, that's not important. Sometimes it's surprising to us. They felt shame. They didn't feel guilt. They felt shame. And shame is being exposed for being less than you think you should be. And so when with the intimacy of marriage, when somebody knows us well, we feel exposed. And that vulnerability, at that point, we could be hurt. And so we often, even in our marriages, protect ourselves from hurt, which limits our openness and vulnerability and limits our growth. But for Christians, if you're a follower of Christ, that relationship provides you a place of safety and protection where a spouse may disappoint or even hurt, and it doesn't destabilize the marriage because your relationship with Christ is strong enough, and your understanding of His love for you is strong enough that you can handle some of the difficulties, disappointments, and address them in ways that may bring about greater growth and deeper intimacy in the marriage. That's the goal.
Yeah, it seems that when you see healthy disciples pursue that discipleship and include their marriage in it, it either accelerates the growth of the marriage or it accelerates the growth as a disciple. It all, the classic example I've used it 1,000 times, it may be trite or whatever, but often there's a triangle that is drawn with God at the top and the man and the wife as the bottom 2 points. And as they move up those lines towards God, it really works.
Yeah, it does.
But it also brings them together. It brings them closer as they grow. It. Maybe a lot of our difficulties in marriage is really a discipleship issue.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah.
So you went in a direction today, and this is the direction we're going to go here on this podcast. When you said you were going to Scripture, I expected, we're going to go to Ephesians 5, because that's where we always go. So full disclosure, you went to Philippians 2. I didn't see that coming. And I'll confess, I have never used this in the context of marriage counseling or pre-marriage counseling at a marriage retreat. I speak at marriage retreats. I'm stealing it.
Okay.
With your permission.
Quite all right.
So
I'm not sure where I came up with it myself. I may have stolen it too.
Good. If the bullet fits, shoot it. But this is from Philippians 2. I'm going to read verses 2 through 8 because you shared a couple lists. How does this mind of Christ show up practically in a marriage? And Philippians 2 speaks about the mind of Christ. Paul writes, he says, "Then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and one of mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of the other. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant. Being made in human likeness and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself, becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross.
Mm-hmm.
And so I underlined some things in there, and I like-minded, same love, one in spirit, one mind, valuing the other above yourself, not looking to your own interests, but to the other. The same mindset as Christ. People who made themselves nothing. We're talking about humility, taking the very nature of a servant,
Mm-hmm.
humbling themselves even to the point of death. We say in a ceremony, until death do us
Mm-hmm.
part, but will you humble yourself to the point of
Mm-hmm.
death? I found myself thinking, if I could just do that, if every married person could do that, you'd almost have no conflict in marriage.
Right.
I don't think that's too far off. Why did you choose this one instead of the obvious ones or the obvious scriptures?
I'm like Hebrews, where it says, somewhere it says,
Yeah.
and so I'm not sure if it's the Ephesians or it's Corinthians, where
Mm.
it says, wives, respect your husbands. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loves the church.
That's Ephesians 5.
That's where then this is how Christ loved.
This is how to do it.
Yeah, so that's how I got there.
Got it. So Ephesians 5, we always say, it talks about mutual submission,
Right.
wives to their husbands, husbands submitting to love her as Christ loved the church.
Right.
What does that look like? But it doesn't really tell us how. And
Right.
this, talking about that like-mindedness, that same love, this is a healthy marriage.
Right.
One of the points that you made, and I think I got it right, make what is good for you as important as the good that you want for yourself. What did you mean by that?
Okay.
Or maybe I butchered that. Yeah.
Make the good for your spouse as important to you as what is good for you. So you are not thinking, okay, I want the biggest piece. I'd rather she do all the work. I need a break. You're saying, okay, what is good for her? What does she need? And I want to make that as important to me as my own needs. Her needs are as important to me as my needs. And so you look at marriage. When Christ loves us, He loves us all equally and fully and deeply. And when this is something C.S. Lewis says, when we love ourselves, we need to love ourselves as God loves us, which is not necessarily always how we love ourselves. We love ourselves and we won't put ourselves first. So if you love yourself as God loves yourself, you can love your spouse that same way. He wants the best for everybody. So if you want your best for your spouse, and if you're following like Christ, you're willing to give up your own needs to be helpful to your spouse.
Right.
And that's what you'll find is as you do that, you think you're losing, but you're gaining because you're deepening your intimacy, you're deepening your spouse's trust in you, recognizing your care for your spouse, and it enriches the relationship.
Yeah, it seems that's the rub.
Yeah.
That's where it gets hard.
Yeah, for sure.
Is we don't understand God's love for us. I know that I take advantage of God's love. But then I also come to God sometimes with shame because I don't measure up.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you read that quote where it says, we need to love as God loves us.
Right.
And it might have been later in the session. I didn't write it down right here, but you were talking about how, oh yeah, it was right here, that God loves us because of who He is.
Right.
Yeah, explain that. It's not dependent on my works. You just said it in a different way, and it really caught me, and I tried to catch it, yeah.
Is this the story of the guy in the mountains?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I got this from our first pastor in Knoxville, Tennessee, Paul Cowell. He's passed away, but just a gifted speaker. And he described the situation like this. He said, imagine you're a young man, you have a beautiful woman as a girlfriend, and you walk into the Smoky Mountains, you walk up to the peak, and you're looking out over the range, and you can see for miles, and it's just absolutely beautiful. And this beautiful woman you're with turns to you and says, why do you love me? And most of us might say, well, I love this about you. I love how you laugh. I love how you care about others. I love, and we are all looking at something in them that we say we love because they're worthy of love. But if you're God and you say, why do you love me? God says, because I'm that kind of guy. Love is just, God is love. It's not something he does. It is who he is. He doesn't love us because of something we have done on our own. He loves in us all that he has created that is good because his love is in some ways a love of the beauty he created. And God is a being who is perfect, holy. I mean, it's just mind-boggling to think of who God is, and that his love for us says more about him than about us. We want to earn our love.
Yeah.
And God says, no, you don't need to earn it. I love. And that's why he sends his son. I gave my son for you because I loved you, because I wanted a relationship with you. I couldn't have it as long as you were a rebel and you were under the curse of death. But my son suffered that curse of death, and he lived a perfect life. That curse is done. You can now be in relationship with me and not live in fear or expectation that you have to earn my love. It's given freely. And that's hard for us because of our pride. We want to be worth it. We want to earn our right to be loved. And God says, no, I just give it freely. That's really hard to take.
Right. And
though that's sort of the spirit to the Reformation, when Luther recaptured that view and that understanding, when we have that attitude and know how much God loves us, it makes it easier with God's help because of his Spirit residing in us to bring this into our marriage.
Right.
To be that kind of guy who loves our wife, that kind of gal who loves her husband because the love of God is coming.
Right. And it's interesting, you said the reason that's hard for us is pride.
Right.
Because we want to earn it.
Right.
Is it true, and I may be wrong, I've been wrong before, that also it's pride that wants her to earn it?
Oh, yeah.
I love you because of this. But if those things change, then it's more like a contract.
Right.
And the goal is to get to an unconditional place.
Right.
I just love you because, because of who you are. For us, I mean, I'm not God. But if I say to my wife, I love you because of who he is.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially.
But we can say it to our spouse, I love you for the good things that God has done in your life, for the physical beauty he's allowed you to have, for his character that's developing, because that's loving in our spouse what God has created. So it's a way of loving God in our spouse.
Right.
Because everything good in creation comes from God. It's an expression of the goodness of God.
Right.
And so we can affirm those things that we value in our spouse. And that's one of the things healthy relationships, marriages do. They see and affirm and express their fondness and appreciation of some things about their spouse, but they don't have to earn it.
Right.
It's not the love is contingent on it. It's the love of God is, in some ways, leads us to loving the good things in our spouse.
Right. And so it's just, I never thought about it that way, that pride's at the root of it.
Yeah.
Either I think I deserve it or I think you have to earn it.
Yeah.
And really neither is true.
Right.
And so this is really where we want to go, to that self-giving, unconditional, really it's the steadfast love of God.
Right.
And this side of heaven, none of us will do it perfectly all the time. The times I get it right, I like to know that I got it right. And then I find myself right back on the pride train, and then but let's get practical here just a little bit. Under this heading is, how does this mind of Christ, and that's what Philippians 2 was all about. And this is, you had stories, you had examples of all of these, and you can just give us the ones that you want. But how does the mind of Christ show up practically in a marriage? There were 7 different things you shared. And the first time you said this word, I didn't know what it meant. And then you explained it. You said the first area is love maps.
Right.
And I'm like, I don't have one of those.
Yeah.
But then you talked about it, and I realized that we all have a love map. Yeah. What's a love map?
Think of a love map as a map of the inner world of your spouse. We all have an outer presentation of ourselves, And what people know of us is what we have revealed to them of ourselves for our outer actions. But we all know ourselves internally, and sometimes that's different from what we present to others. And so to a love map is knowing that inner reality, that subjective reality of your spouse, and knowing and caring about that, knowing what's important, what do they value, what is harmful to them, what is offensive to them, knowing all that. What are their goals? What are they longing for? What are their hopes? What motivates them? The more you know of your spouse at that level, the better your marriage is, because that's at the heart of intimacy. Getting to think of most couples when they first meet, they're just ecstatic as they get to know each other. Right. It's like exploring a whole new world, and maintaining that and bringing that into the long term of a marriage. That there's always room for learning, because we all change. Things that are important to us change, and knowing that about your spouse. Because as you know that then you're now prepared to know how to respond in ways that reflect what's important to your spouse, rather than imposing what's important to you on them.
Right. So would a love map then also include, I know what triggers my spouse has?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like from her family, a tone of voice that's not appropriate.
Right.
It's not good to start a conversation this way. I think you mentioned the love languages as well. Yeah. Is it gifts? Is it touch? Is it words of affirmation and so on?
Service.
That's all part of the map.
That's all part of it.
Right.
Yeah.
So really, what makes this person tick? Yeah. And I don't know if I shared this before. I may have shared this in Help My Marriage Part 1, but I heard a pastor talking about, and I totally agree, how many young spouses are standing before me. They're about to take their vows, right? And I know what they're both thinking. This guy, in his mind, she's all dolled up, the best she's ever looked. She's been exercising, prepping, the hair, the makeup, the dress, the stuff, and he may not even be conscious of it, but he's thinking, this is how it's going to be the rest of my life. This is how she's going to roll out of bed in the morning. This is going to be after the 5th kid. This is what I married, right?
He forgot about gravity.
Exactly. Yeah.
And age.
Yeah. And he thinks she's never going to change from this Twitter-pated thing. And then in her mind, most brides, even though it's not conscious and they may not admit it, is looking at him saying, well, he's not perfect, but I'll change him. Right?
Yeah.
But we change.
Yep, we do.
We change. And so the map changes. It isn't one-dimensional. It's more like three-dimensional.
Right. And that's where a healthy marriage, you're constantly having time to talk about the changes. That I've done this. I mean, sometimes it's, somebody's in a career and they feel, that career feels ended to me. I need to go for something else. And all of that inner experience, all the what's processing inwardly, we share with our spouse. That's, we talk about in marriage, you become one flesh. And people often think of that only in the sexual sense, but it's more, we're all in this together. We're, as a married people, there's a me, there's a we, but we are one unit, and so we have to know where each other is.
Right. I think the one flesh gets ignored.
Yeah.
Or it's just that concept is worth meditating on, because it goes back to, we're not going to meditate on it here. Yeah. Are we like-minded? It's so easy to think of all the ways I'm not like-minded with my spouse.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have the same love. Are we always one in spirit? Sometimes. But mapping how she thinks and feels, if she's also mapping me, and for some reason my mind right now is thinking about how they map the ocean floor, or they're mapping the dark side of the moon. Women are from, what is it? Men are Mars, women from Venus, right? So we're mapping these totally different planets. They change. That's important. The second thing you said in a healthy marriage from that passage is that they nurture fondness and admiration.
Right. You want to communicate your love and your care and your enjoyment of your spouse. there are things that you admire in your spouse. There are times I'll say about Beth, I really like how you handled that. You did a good job talking to that person. What do you see that you really think they've done a good job? We talk about how to praise people. Sometimes praise says, I really thought you did this well. But encouragement says, I could see how much that energized you. Encouragement focuses on what you see about how they evaluated themselves and acknowledges it. And so I see in my wife, often I'll say, one of the things that I just admire, it's to me a mystery how she does it. She always knows what people need before they even realize it, particularly, like we have friends who are missionaries in Honduras, and Beth said, I think she needs an Instant Pot. She bought one, sent it down, and then texted or emailed and said, I've sent you an Instant Pot. And this lady said, I had just been thinking how helpful that would be. And Beth is always ahead.
She's just intuitive.
Intuitive and sees the need. Beth spends a lot of time with my mom, who's 95 years old, and often will just figure out what she needs. And I just admire that. And I let her know, I don't know how you do it. My brain doesn't work that way. But there's a way that she is able to observe and anticipate, and I think God just gives her insight. And so I try to acknowledge and admire, and I say, I imagine that's a lot of fun for you to do that. And so that's it. Fondness, telling her I love her, giving her hugs. I know she likes lots of hugs. And it's like good friends who value each other. Just that we do the things that let us know day to day each is important to the other, and that we appreciate who the other person is.
Right.
Even though it may be very different from us.
Right.
She's much more extroverted. I'm always amazed at how she can start a conversation with anybody. And I'm more introverted. I can talk a lot, but I need people to ask me questions. If nobody's asking me questions, my brain goes blank.
You just go to another place.
I just go to another place, and I say, I want to talk, but I have no idea what to do.
Yeah, right.
And so, but I acknowledge. I say, oh man, you do that so well.
So more than just valuing the differences, it's valuing the person. I mean, sure, you could tell your spouse, I think your hair looks nice. I mean, you could do some of those surface things. One of the, I don't know if it's an epidemic, but it seems to me, maybe this is a Northern Michigan thing, maybe this is across all marriages. It seems like people struggle, especially the longer they're married, to remember to use their words or a text or whatever to do this.
Right.
And this is the growing apart thing.
Right.
Is it like, because when you were dating, man, you say anything just to get another date or, to get her to say I do or to spend your life with me. But why is it just laziness, or is it we're not thinking about it? Is it lack of intentionality?
I think lack of intentionality. The old story about the wife says, you never say I love you. And the husband said, I told you that when we got married. If it changes, I'll let you know. It's like we forget that a relationship requires maintenance, nurture, needs to be fed. And we do. We get caught up in the daily schedules. You can end up, particularly when you have kids, this is very easy to happen. Couples do all the things to coordinate all the activities for kids, and they lose touch with each other. And the kids move out of the house, and they look and they say, who's the stranger I'm living with? Even though I've worked with them all this time, couples need to keep working where they're basically feeding each other what they think of each other, how they appreciate. Some people do this by having a regular date night. Some people just work it into everyday conversations. And so every couple can come up with it different ways. We have friends, and they do lots of really romantic things that Beth and I just do not like, that sickly sweet kind of, you buy lots of chocolate.
Chocolate and
that's just not of interest to us.
Yeah. But
at the same time, we care about each other, and we do share through lots of different ways, texting, just taking a little quick time, how what happened this day, and debriefing each
or
other on our
even
day.
just debriefing the day, showing interest in what happened for you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There was an example that I don't know if it relates to this, but you had said that you like to golf, I like to golf. Your wife has no interest in golf,
right?
But she always asks how the golf went, even though she could care less about how the golf went. But she cares about you,
right? And
so she wants to know how the golf went.
Right. She'll even watch golf on TV with me.
Well, it's great to take a nap too.
Yeah.
Well, there was something else you said, because I just like tools. Years ago, well, it was probably our second year of marriage. And this is our marriage. This is not every other marriage. But it has to do with nurturing fondness and admiration. It was Valentine's Day. And I've been through 4 years of dating and engagement, probably the second or third year of marriage. And it was Valentine's Day. And my wife was at the store. And she saw the card section was full of men buying whatever cards were left. They were, jockeying to get the last flowers available and whatever chocolate bars that they could find. And it was Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
And I guess we saw each other at lunch. And I hadn't been to the store yet to do all those things. It was somewhere in my mind.
Yeah.
And it was her idea. She said, I hate Valentine's Day. Now, this is just my wife's opinion. Yeah. So if you're out there and you love Valentine's Day, I'm not trying to rain on your parade. This is my wife. She goes, I hate it. She goes, I don't like the colors. This old red and black and shiny. And she goes, I don't like this image of this is the day you're forced to show your fondness and admiration for me. She goes, I like flowers. Can we agree that we are never celebrating this again? I'll always accept a card from you. I'll always accept flowers from you. But I'd rather, it was almost more pressure. I think I was joking with our producer, Matt Hughes, about it. There was a part of me was like, does she really mean it? Is this an ambush? Is this a trap? But for her, she was actually, I think, expressing that she wanted the fondness and the admiration, but she wanted it to be real. She didn't want it to be forced. And that agreement has worked out for me for the last almost 30 years.
Yeah, we're much the same.
Yeah.
Once in a while we'll do something, but there's no expectation because I try to do the kinds of things that people do on Valentine's Day, and part of me resents that it's put out there so people can make money off of us.
Yes, of course. Yeah, it's a made up deal.
And we don't need Valentine's Day to eat chocolate. We've got that all the time.
Yeah, she's got the stash you told me about. The other thing that is just an easy thing to do with fondness and admiration that surprised me is people talk about how emails and now texts they don't display tone.
Right.
So she'll send me a little note and I'll send a quick reply. I'm in a meeting. I'm in a seminar on counseling. And one time she made this remark. She goes, I couldn't tell from your text because you just said, okay. Is he mad about the thing I asked him to pick up or not? And she asked me, she said, could you use more emojis? So I probably use more emojis with her than anyone else. And it could be about whatever. It could be, hey, can you pick up this at the store? Can you make the run to Traverse City? One of the kids has an appointment. And my reply will be happy to. A heart makes all the difference. And it's silly. If I start sending you texts with hearts, that's a different.
I'd let your wife know.
Yeah, we got some other counsel. We got some other counseling to do. But look for opportunities to display or to nurture fondness and admiration. The third one, and I wrote her because I'm a guy, but this really caught my attention, probably more than the rest of the list. I don't want people to shut the podcast off. But you said, turn towards your spouse. I wrote down, turn towards her. What does that mean? A healthy marriage, mind of Christ, I turn towards her.
For me, that means when I'm reading, my wife has something to say, I put my book down. It means when she comes in and I haven't seen her, I stop what I'm doing and give her a hug or say, I missed you, or what's going on, how you doing? It's just you look for opportunities to focus on your spouse. You're turning towards. You're not turning away, and you're attentive to what her needs are, and you're the turning towards. Say, I'm here for you. You're important to me. I'm paying attention to you. It doesn't have to be a long-term thing. It's just an acknowledgement. My father would always come in, and before he did anything else, he would greet my mom, give her a quick kiss. And he would say, it was his way, I'm back and I'm glad you're here. And I saw that modeled.
And it's so little.
It is so little. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. But it's so easy, to come in, you're on your phone, and you go, and you never look up from the phone. That's not turning towards. Turning towards says, right now you're the most important thing to me. Doesn't mean there aren't other important things, but right now you're the most important person to me. Now, right now you're what I'm focusing on.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be a long, big ordeal. And when that happens over and over and over, the message, the consistent message is, I care for you. I love you. I'm here for you. And that's the turning towards. Because unhealthy marriages, they turn away. They don't. They don't respond.
Right. Now, another way you explained it before, so that was the small physical, practical way. So that's a physical response. I put my book down.
Right.
I used to joke, being at a marriage thing, that the ability to pause a show because DVR had just come out or the game was one of the greatest gifts. Because I was telling men, hit pause on the game. Don't put pause on her. Hit pause on the game. And you're saying so I can turn towards her.
Right.
You're not going to miss the game. The game's not important. It's a commercial or whatever. But beyond the physical, you said, so I'm turning towards my spouse and not away. And one way you described it is, and I was writing fast, do things with. Also, turning towards is being with.
Right.
And the whole idea was how much marriages is just doing our own thing.
Right.
So what does that look like? In light of turning towards, to do things, to
there may be things that my wife would like to do that maybe I wouldn't choose to do, but I'll do them with her because she's important to me. And often I find out, oh, they are really enjoyable. We did a cruise once a couple of years ago, and we we're somewhere in Greece. I think we're at where the Olympics is. I don't remember where it was. And we didn't want to go to the site there, so we just hung out the things around. And there was this museum of Greek technology. She wanted to go, well, I can be a little bit of a stick in the mud, and I can entertain myself in my own head. And I said, okay, I'll go. And she said, well, you don't really want to. And it was like, well, €1, like $1. I said, yeah, I'll do it. And if I choose to do it, I'm willing. I'm not going to go with a bad attitude. Well, I walked in there. It was fascinating because they had vending machines that were run by the weight of a coin. They had a robot that would serve wine, and it was run by water pouring through it. It was really fascinating. And so I told her, this is fascinating. And, I missed, if I had said, no, I just don't want to do it and turned away from her, I didn't really have an interest. And she said, and I said, I have no idea. I've never been there. I don't know what it is, but I'm willing to do it because it's important to you. That's turning towards her. Right. Afterwards, I said, yeah, that was really good. And I've learned maybe I should more quickly say, okay, if it's important to her, then sort of be a little hesitant. But so turning towards, there are things that are important to her. Turning towards is, I'll join you in them. Remember reading about a guy who loved to hunt, and he wanted his wife to go hunting with him. They got up early, they drove, they didn't talk. They sat in a deer stand for all day, didn't talk. Come home, and his wife is thinking, oh, this is horrible. And he turns to his wife and says, this is the best day of my life. Because she had turned to him. She invested in what was important to him. Wow. And it didn't mean that they talked and did all the things that she might have wanted. Her presence there meant so much to him.
Just the being there.
Yeah.
So that turning towards, it's physical. It might be an event. It's also turning toward, and maybe I'm reaching here, what's important to my spouse.
Right.
The hopes, the dreams, what she wants to accomplish.
Right.
For a wife, what he wants to accomplish. It's attentiveness to a certain degree. Right. So this is the mind of Christ. And I could get tears thinking about how it talks about God turning his face towards us.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the same way he loves us.
Yes.
He's attentive to us. He's the good shepherd.
Yeah.
He's all of those things. And man, I need to be a better husband. So the fourth one was to have the mind of Christ. This is going to help your marriage, people, I promise. This is probably my second like big eureka moment. And it was so simple. Keep a positive perspective. You said keep a positive perspective.
Yeah.
And what I wrote down here is learn to give the most positive interpretation of whatever she's doing or saying or reacting as possible.
Right.
How do I do that? Or maybe I didn't describe that right.
No, you got it. It's easy to look for the negative interpretation. She does something, you're not sure about what it means. You may think, she's upset with me or she's being irritable. But think, what's the most positive interpretation? Give your spouse, assume the best of your spouse.
I like that. Assume the best.
Assume the best. And even if she's irritable or worn out, don't personalize it. Don't say she's doing this for me. Just say, she's really tired. And then think, what would be helpful to her? Just always give the most positive interpretation you can to what your spouse is doing. Until, unless there's evidence otherwise, but usually don't assume. It has to be more blatant. Because what you're saying is, okay, you may have lots of different moods, but I'm going to always assume you're have good intentions, and I'm going to assume that you're doing the best job you can.
Right.
And I mean, we had 2 kids, and there were times, she was just worn out for those kids. If I took it personally every time that I'm mad she's not attending to me after she's been with kids all day, that's really not fair. My positive is, I'm glad she's able to give even a little attention given all that she had to do all day. So, okay, now I can give her something. I can help. I can, we did tag team parenting, and maybe I can step in and be with the kids, give her a little break.
Right.
So just always look and give the best, most positive interpretation you can to what your spouse is doing.
I think that's so critical because when I see marriages in crisis, and if we have time, we'll talk about some of the trouble things because you had some great examples there, is some marriages can just be blanketed with a cloud of negativity.
Yeah.
And you just want one person. Like I've been in a counseling session where I've said to, maybe this is the wrong thing. I've learned this week how to be a better counselor. But it was like, okay, can we just pause here? Tell me one good thing.
Yeah.
Can you tell me one good thing either about this person or this marriage?
Right.
Because that cloud is just descended.
Yeah.
And then it becomes, the word's not self-sustaining. It just becomes a cycle where he did, she did, you said, he said, someone's got to break it.
Right.
And we need God's help to do that. And I don't think you're saying it's about like this fake joy.
No. But it's if you remember what it was like when you met this person and how enthralled you were, to keep that alive as not necessarily the high emotion, but that same attitude. One of the things when marriages are having trouble, one of the things that happens, they begin retelling the story of how they met in more negative ways. But if you keep a positive, you can tell the story of how you met in a way that is still exciting.
I've seen that.
I had a extended family member married to one of my cousins, and I asked him, "How'd you meet my cousin?" And he shared the story, and they'd been married at least 15 years by that time. And he's a very reserved guy, and he was in tears as he talked about how he met her, how much he loved her.
Wow.
And I just thought, I didn't see, but I saw into his heart. And it was, and his deep love for her. And I just still remember that to that day. It was a gift to me for him to show me how he still thought of her the way he did when he first saw her and was in love. Yeah.
Wow. No, that's good. Give it the most positive interpretation as you possibly can.
Yeah.
That's a perspective. The fifth one, this is usually when they come see us.
Yeah.
Is you said to manage conflict respectfully.
Right.
I feel like conflict is where the sin nature is all throughout, but that's when it can really just weigh the whole thing down.
Yeah. Every relationship's going to have conflict. If you got two people who are different from each other, different goals, different experiences, you're going to have conflict. Sometimes conflict is on core values. Sometimes conflict is just on methods. Do we do it this way? Do we do it that way? And more often it's of methods than of values. But
you both want the same thing.
Yeah, you
disagree how to get there.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But doing it respectfully, one thing that means keep the emotions under control so you don't lose control and say things that hurt each other. You want to be objective. You don't want to personalize. You don't want to say, you caused this problem. You want to say, we have a problem. Visually, my image is rather than there's something between us, we're standing on other sides of it and we're accusing each other, that problem in the middle, we need to stand side by side and look at that and say, that's our problem. How are we going to solve it? And one thing that happens where marriages start to go bad is they let emotions get out of control and they say things that are wounding to each other. And that's why part of managing conflict respectfully and use repair techniques. Repair techniques are the things you say that help bring the emotion back down. It might just be apologizing for when you said something that was cruel or mean. It might mean making a joke to help in the midst of maybe tearful argument, you make somebody laugh. It might mean making fun of yourself. Sometimes we have conflict and I realize, I'm doing something the way my father did and I know she doesn't like it. And I say, I'm being my dad. I know that. Okay.
Right.
And so repair techniques.
But that takes humility.
Oh, it does.
To recognize I'm being my mom or I'm being my dad. Yeah.
And so you want to part of managing intimate relationship is keeping the negative emotions at a level where we don't say things we regret. You don't want to blow up your marriage just because you let the emotions get out of control.
Right.
And
one of the things you shared later that I thought is an excellent tool that has to do with managing a conflict respectfully is when there's an issue. And you use an example of this, I might ask you to share, but we were talking about a soft startup to the conversation.
Right.
And a soft startup means, okay, my wife, there's something that I did and it's something I often do and she's now ready to deal with it.
Right.
There's two ways. The disrespectful way is to come at it with you always, John, this, and this is irritating me or this is making me mad, as opposed to a soft startup. Right. Can you just speak to that? Just to that tool. It's part of a bigger thing, but just that little tool.
A soft startup is you want to make a complaint, but you don't want to blame. So rather than say you say I. I felt this when you did that. It's hard to get mad at somebody who's just talking about their experience because you're not being attacked. If you say, you did this, you mistreated me, you've already made an accusation.
Right.
You want to talk about how they impacted you, and it's putting it out in a more objective way, and it's easier to talk about. That's a soft startup, and using I statements, it's hard to do. Yeah. We have to train ourselves. We have to practice it. It feels a little awkward at first, but it bears long-term fruitful harmony where you just take responsibility for your own emotions. You don't accuse somebody else for causing your emotions, but you say, I felt this. When you did that, I felt this, and that hurt, and I'd like us to talk about it.
Right.
And so that's a soft startup. Is that the tool you're thinking of?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking as you were talking there, when I start with you, so if I have a conflict with you, just two men here, and I say, you've done this. Yeah. I'm the judge, I'm the jury, and we're just determining what the punishment's going to be.
And all I'm going to do is put up my wall, and I might counterattack. Well, you did this.
Exactly.
And I mean, and couples are good at that. Problem A, you caused problem A. Well, you caused problem B. Well, you caused problem C. You caused problem D.
And then we're in a mess.
Okay, you can't solve that because you have every grievance from the past 5 years.
Right. Instead of when I say, well, and maybe this reveals my manipulative heart, but if I say, I feel this way when you do this.
Right.
There's a part of you can't contest that.
Right.
That's a fact.
Right.
But by doing it that way, and then coming with an attitude of how do we fix that?
Right.
Now, the we may not be, I need you to bend to me so I never feel that again, but half the battle is just revealing what's going on inside of me.
Yeah.
This is the whole intimacy thing.
Right.
And I think it was related to this. You shared a great example of a conflict you had with your wife where someone used a soft, I don't know if it was a startup, it was a gentle response, and you delayed the conversation.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Because I was very respectful.
We were early in our marriage. We had one child. We were very busy. I was working at the counseling center at the university in our town. And it was late at night, about 10. We were tired. And I honestly don't remember what the conflict was, but I knew we're getting heated here. And we needed our sleep. And I said, I just don't have the energy to do this right now. Let's look at our schedule right now and schedule a time when we'll talk about this. Rather than let's talk about it later, it's let's get the time. We had it there. We figured out at a time. It was like 3 days later in the afternoon. Our daughter was somewhere. It was an infant, and it was so interesting. We went to sleep. The next 3 days were really good. We didn't have any conflict. And then we sat down to talk about it, and we solved it in 15 minutes with no emotion whatsoever. It was an easy problem to solve. But when we were worn out, it seemed like a huge thing. And that really helped us learn, we can do this. We don't have to solve everything immediately as long as we commit to a time when we will have energy and can talk about it calmly. And that was very, that just for both of us really stands out. It was like, we have a tool that we figured out how to use.
So it almost gave you permission to put down the weapons.
Right.
Unclench the fists.
Right.
And there was enough trust that, we've made a date. We're going to keep that date.
Right.
And you said what was surprising to you is that the next 3 days were fine.
Yeah.
It wasn't like resentment. You weren't like staring at each other.
No.
The Cold War through the, walking through the hall.
Yeah.
That type of thing. But I also think that that's super respectful because we said manage conflict respectfully. You were respecting in that moment your own biological needs for sleep and the fact that she was tired as well.
Right.
And I assume that somewhere in there by making an appointment, and we're not saying every conflict has to be resolved that way, but in that instance, I value you enough to put this on the schedule.
Yeah, exactly.
This is how important it is to me, not to fight it out, but to work it out.
Right, because if you don't put it on the schedule, it will stay sort of in an unresolved column. But if you have a plan to work on it, you're not carrying it around until then. And so it's respectful. I don't want what I'm saying. What we said to each other, we don't want this to be something that derails us. So we need to talk about it when we have the energy and the ability calmly to address it.
So that's good.
And like many problems, when you solve them, you forget what they were.
Yeah. You've come to a mutual solution, but you can't come to a mutual solution unless you agree that this is a problem. And with the soft startup, it's like, no, I want to solve this because I don't want my wife mad at me.
Right.
And so when she comes in with, hey, I feel this way when you do this, I don't want to do that anymore.
Right.
I don't think a lot of wives know how much their husbands don't want conflict.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think men generally are avoidance of conflict.
Yeah.
And most of us, at least I am, I'm so foolish, I keep walking into ambushes of my own making, right? And so anything that helps us, hey, this is an issue, let's deal with it.
Right.
Just another thing that I wrote down there under how to manage conflict respectfully is not reacting to emotions.
Right.
That's difficult.
That is, yes. And if a marriage can solve that, they have done great work, because most marriage problems are easily solvable unless the emotions get out of control and get to the heated defensive stage. So most people I've discovered with the couples I've worked with, if we can get the emotions calmed down, they can usually resolve. Now, there are some problems that are more difficult. Some couples, every couple can have perennial problems, something they keep bumping up against. But if you have a history of resolving all the other things, the perennial problem is just something you talk about regularly to manage it.
And you said like in your own marriage, the perennial issue is your wife is an extrovert.
Right.
You're by nature an introvert.
Right.
So she wants to go to all the parties. You'd rather not leave the house unless you have to, unless you're going to golf or fish.
Yeah.
Or go to work.
Yeah.
That's a perennial issue. That's not going to change.
No.
And not expecting the other person to change, but hey, how do we compromise here?
Right.
How do we manage this? You gave the example of the cruise and the, so managing your emotions. The next one, this just gave me a lot of hope for people. It says, help each other achieve their dreams. Yes. And you may have worded it a little bit different way, but essentially that's how I heard it.
Yeah, because we all come with things that are important to us to accomplish, dreams that we have for ourselves. It could be anything. It can be, a certain kind of travel, a level of education.
Something on a bucket list?
Something on a bucket list. My parents, my mom never finished college, where they got married, never finished college. And then we were on the mission field. We came back. I was in college, and she went back to college, and then she got a master's in adult education. She wanted that degree, and my dad did everything to help her. But my dad always drove. He helped her. She knew how to drive, but she didn't know how to do maps. He taught her how to use a map, how to find her way around, and helped encourage her independence that way and help her achieve a dream. And so I saw that modeled. And so whatever the dream is, the couples value the dreams that each other have and want to help each other achieve those dreams.
I'm just sitting here thinking about, again, how very much like that is Christ with us.
Yeah.
He wants to see us fulfill our potential.
Right.
It says that, when we delight ourselves in the Lord.
Right.
Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart.
Yeah, exactly.
Not every dream can be achieved.
Right.
But even and maybe I'm reaching here, even the failed dreams, right?
Yeah.
Or just because I'm a dreamer, and I have dreams that are never going to happen.
Yeah.
Dunking a basketball and playing in the NBA was never a dream, but if it was, right, and it's not, so please don't do this for me. It's not my sport, and I don't even watch it, right?
Yeah.
But if that was a dream for me, and I know I'm never going to achieve it because I used to be 5'10", and now the doctor said I'm 5'9.5".
Yeah.
And that physician's assistant is a liar. I made her measure me again, right? And I'm never going to jump that high, and it's not going to happen. But just the fact that my wife knows that impossible dream,
right?
If all of a sudden tickets showed up for whatever, the favorite team, even something that says, I know you, and I know this is important to you, you never got to do that.
Yeah.
But I don't just dismiss that.
Right.
That's something that's still real for you.
Right.
So that is helping each other achieve their dream. And I wrote down, it shows a deep interest and love, but a deep interest in this person.
Right.
And you had shared, you already shared that your wife, no interest in golf.
Right.
She actually went golfing with you one time, and spent all the time on the cart with her girlfriend.
Yeah, or my cousin.
Yeah, or your cousin. But it showed an interest in the things that you're interested in.
Yeah.
This is the last one, and then we're going to do a bonus here. This was really meaningful. You said because this is intimacy on another level.
Yeah,
and that's create shared meanings. To create shared meanings.
Right.
What does that mean? I had no idea when you said that. And then as soon as you said it, I started thinking of all the shared meetings I have with my wife. Yeah.
When you know your spouse, to know what's important, and you have experiences together that impact you, you start to build a history, and you have memories together, and those things become meaningful. They help create a legacy, a shared history. Mm-hmm. I'll give an example. Our house in Tampa, we have a little apartment where we have people stay, and often missionaries. And my wife's mother, her grandmother was a missionary in Peru, and so her mother, as a little child, as a 2-year-old, was in Peru. The first couple that we had stay in this, my father named it, calls it the Prophet's Chamber.
Yeah.
And the first missionary who stayed there, Beth was talking, and, where are you? They were missionaries in Guatemala. Well, then to the wife, where'd you grow up? Well, I grew up on a mission field in Peru. And it turned out that she was like third generation after Beth's grandmother had started this.
Wow. Same mission?
Same mission. They lived in the house that Beth's grandfather had built, and as a baby was in the baby bed that was built for Beth's mother.
Hmm.
Now, for us, that was just a confirmation of that, that chamber.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I tear up. It meant so much to us.
Yeah.
And so that's our shared value of hospitality.
Legacy.
And legacy.
Yeah.
And so, doing that as a family, we just had our best family, extended family, were working on legacy and helping create this for grandkids. So we had a grandson who just turned 13, and we had a coming of age ceremony for him at age 13 at Thanksgiving when Beth's siblings were all there. And we gave him a task. He had a 13-place treasure hunt, which he said was easy.
Because he likes them.
He likes them. We had to keep the time under control, so we made it a little bit easier than I might have chosen to.
Yeah.
And then we had a meal together. Then we talked. We talked a little bit about family history. We talked about family values, and then all the women left, and all the men, and my grandson, and none of the others. We all sat around the fire and talked about our own journeys into adulthood. And so just creating a legacy and a shared history together. And it was very energizing. And he's pretty much an introvert, but I could tell he was really taking it in.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
So this shared meanings, it can be about your family legacy. Right. The traditions that you have, the memories that you make.
That's right.
That's there's memories that my wife and I have that I won't share.
Yeah.
Because they're just for us.
Exactly. And I know that. Yeah.
And then you also mentioned a language that might seem silly to anyone else. So even if you're not, you're like, oh, I don't have a prophet's chamber, I can't do the ceremony thing. You have these, you just don't know what they are.
Every family has stories or sayings that come out of stories. We had 2 young kids stay with us while their mother was in the hospital with birth with twins that was difficult, and they were with us about a week. And so the young boy, when he'd get up in the morning, he'd see us, he'd say, "How are woo?" And so we just say that. We wake up and look, "How are woo?" There was a
so like you and your wife now say
this, we say that all the time.
Because it was a shared funny thing.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah.
And as Beth grew up, there was, when she was sick, somehow in their family there was a phrase that came out of the Peanuts cartoon, "My poor sweet Babu." Yeah. And so whenever she's sick, I just say, "My poor sweet Babu."
Yeah.
And it's just comforting to her. And she, when I say that, it just links me with all those people back to her parents who cared for her when she didn't feel well.
Right.
So every family has those little sayings, little comments that are sort of like the in language of the family.
Yes.
Sometimes they're in jokes. That creates a shared sense of meaning, shared history. It's a way of saying we're in a community together.
Right.
We're all together. We get it.
Right. I think organizationally they call that a tribal language.
Yeah, yeah.
But with a clan, there's a clan language,
right.
And with a marriage, there's a language.
Yeah.
And for me, at least the way I understood it, it has the same power as when I catch your eye across the room
right.
and there's a wink.
Yeah.
Or when someone says something and we have an inside joke and we just look at each other
exactly.
and she's trying not to laugh.
Yep.
That's intimacy.
Yeah.
Not all intimacy is long, deep talks, knee to knee, or sexual intimacy, or what did you think about this epistemologically?
Yeah.
Some of it is just the little things.
We see this the same way.
Yeah.
We have the same. We've got the same reaction.
Right.
You get me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm remembering one of the last family vacations we ever did. And my dad's got the classic dad joke, sense of humor. Holiest man I know. And so it was funnier because it was him. And he's in the front. And all of a sudden, he just starts laughing. And he's laughing at a billboard. And we were in Michigan. And Nichols is a bread company that makes, it was an advertisement for Nichols hamburger buns.
Okay.
And in big letters, and we all saw it. It said, "Pick Nichols buns." And my dad I thought he was going to crash the car. And now we're laughing because he's laughing.
Right.
To this day, my mom and dad, even when, someone just, hey, do you want a bun for that hamburger?
Yeah.
All someone has to say, is it a Nichols bun? And the whole family's lost it. That happened 35 years ago. But it's having that shared thing with your spouse, those deep meanings that can surprise you, or they can be moments where you're incredibly vulnerable. Yep. And it's important in a healthy marriage. There's one more bonus one that I think is important. So here at the Tab, we love to go after men. And you weren't doing this on purpose, but I think it's I don't think it was a part of the list, or maybe it was and I missed it.
But I know what it is.
Yeah. It's specifically with husbands and the influence of their wife. Yeah.
If you want a healthy marriage, man, listen to your wife. Yeah. Let your wife influence you. Most men, they're afraid if they let their wives influence them, the wives are going to take advantage and try to dominate them, because that's what the man would do.
Right. Interesting. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, that's how that's how
we think.
The curse was, the woman will desire the man, but the man will lord over you, will dominate you. That's what we expect they would do what we're going to do. But in healthy, good functioning marriages, the husband lets the wife influence him. And here's how a wife responds. The wife doesn't say, "Oh, good, now I can take charge of him because he lets me influence him." The wife's respect for her husband increases. Oh, he's listening to me. I know I'm important to him. And the desire is not to control, but to be valued for the influence she has. And I've had clients where the husband got into big trouble, and he finally admitted, "My wife told me it was going to happen, and I didn't listen to her." Wives know us, and we need to listen to them. And that's part of the humility. Sometimes it's hard to listen to our wife because we want to be the strong one. We want to have all the answers. And when our wife is a helpmeet to us, somebody who God's given to us to help us, and we accept their influence, that builds the marriage.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was this picture we've shared before that some people view marriage as there's a winner loser. Yeah. There's always a winner loser. Yeah. And that's not the kind of marriage that you want. No. It's and then some people mistakenly say, "No, our marriage is going to be 50-50." Yeah. And 50-50 doesn't work either, because there's times it's going to be 90-10. Right. She's ill, I'm ill, or the kids, or what have you. But that's a beautiful picture of side by side. Yeah. Because you use the word, the helpmeet, or in the ESV, the helpmate. Right. And if we let our wives influence us, it actually, you said, will actually increase her sense of trust in me and security. Right, exactly. Which is, I think, a woman's deepest need. Yeah. Is the sense, a man's deepest need is to feel significant. Right. A woman's deepest need is to feel secure. Right. And, just in my own marriage, she'll worry about the roof. She'll worry about the car. What about the tire? I mean, she's worried about all of those things. And I can very quickly be like, "Listen, I'm the man here," and take that as a threat. Yeah. Instead of, I don't remember the last time we put on tires. Yeah. Maybe we should look at that. Maybe I need to look at how much snow is on our roof here in February of 2025. It's a lot, So even during the session today, it's like, I'll have my friend pick up a roof rake, and I didn't feel like raking a roof or whatever it's called. It's some telescopic, Matt will tell me about it, but it's to get the snow off the roof. Yeah. I'll have my son do it. But just taking those few moments, I'm in the session going, don't you know I'm in a counseling session? Yeah. And then it's like, oh, wait a second. I need to accept this influence. Yeah. And maybe we should take care of that. Yeah. And if I can build trust with her, I'll take anything I can get at this point. Yeah. Good. But it increases her trust in us. Right. So there's a love map. This is a summary. Learn to map the love language, the love style, how your spouse gives and receives love. Nurture fondness and admiration. Turn towards one another, that positive perspective, the soft startup in managing conflict respectfully. I've always said, man, when a marriage reduces to calling each other names, we've gone too far.
Yeah.
That's one thing
sure.
I'm thankful my wife and I have never done.
Yeah.
Even in the worst conflict, we've never, people can be horrible to one another. Help each other achieve dreams, those shared meanings, and then the bonus. Husbands, we're talking to you.
Yeah.
Accept the influence of your wife.
Right.
There's a reason.
Right.
I had a mullet when I married my wife. I accepted her influence then. I think it's to everyone's betterment. Do you agree, Matt? Okay, Matt, our executive producer, the big man, is agreeing. So any last words just to help people with marriage?
Well,
This has been helpful.
just pray for your marriage. God's really interested in your marriage. He wants your marriage to succeed. And so pray for your spouse. I pray for my spouse daily. And one of my prayers is, Lord, help me love her as Christ loved the church. Now, I pray for that. That's my intent. Sometimes I'm better at it than others. But pray, ask for God's help in your marriage. You're not alone. And then look around. If you think you've got some issues you need to talk to, find somebody to talk to. Look at somebody whose marriage you like and see if they can maybe be helpful to you. What you'll find, every healthy marriage has conflict. They just have a way of dealing with it that doesn't destroy the marriage. The old marriage vows, let what God put together, no man put asunder.
Yeah.
Well, we're often the couples are the ones who put it asunder. You don't have to. God's there to help. Yeah. And a church is a good place in which to find healthier marriages and maybe help support for your marriage.
So we learn more about the love of Christ. We let His love change our lives. That'll change our marriage. Marriage is a picture of our union with Christ. It's meant to change us.
Right.
You will change in marriage. Your spouse is going to change. You're going to change. Let Christ change you. And I think there's more than just your marriage that depends on it.
Right. Yeah, because other people are looking at you in ways that you're not even aware.
Right.
The other people are learning from how you handle your marriage. Your kids are learning. Both my wife and I were privileged to come from families with parents who were married for over 50 years and modeled many good things. So we came with some advantage. If you come from a family of divorce, you may not have that model, but God can still help you. You can be the first one in your generation to have a long-term marriage. But I come from a long line, about maybe 4 generations of Christians who have sustained marriages over the long haul. Though my mom's mom divorced her husband because of his multiple affairs. So even in there, but she did a great job as a single mom, and all of her children have stayed married, and so. Don't despair. God is there for your marriage. He values it.
It's a picture of our union with Christ.
Right.
People are dependent on us. Our kids are dependent on us.
Yep.
I heard one time that the purpose of marriage is not to make you happy. It's to make you holy.
Yep.
When I first got married, I didn't like that.
Yeah, no.
Not at all. The longer I've been married and seen what God has done in my life, I don't have a perfect marriage. I don't think anyone does. But I think I'm a little bit more like Christ than I used to be.
Yeah,
so,
I know I am.
Yeah. Jim, this has been awesome. Thank you.
Well, thank you
for
the invitation.
It's been a long day. It's a lot of words.
Yep.
But we're going to pull the parachute, let you get a little bit of rest from this.
Okay.
Tabernacle family, this is Help My Marriage Part 2. There is a commitment. Help My Marriage Part 3. The full intention is to be Adam and Rachel Ray. So share this. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Our algorithm's real. I don't know if we're still saying that. Are they still a thing? Still real. Yeah. Share it with your spouse. Listen to it separately. Listen to it together. We don't care. Help My Marriage Part 4 tentatively would be someone interviewing John and Darcy. We're still in talks with Darcy's agent. Pray for that. It was not written into the contract. We're just... There's some negotiations that are not going well. I might have to recuse myself from those. But anyways, until next time, Tabernacle family, this is Jim Reed, Lord Matthew Corey Hughes, and John Vermilia signing off.
Bye-bye.